The signal arrived at 0312 station time, and I was already awake. I had not been sleeping well for months. That was nothing new. The bunk on relay station Kairos was narrow, and the recycled air smelled like metal and old arguments. And I had chosen this posting precisely because nothing happened here. Nothing was supposed to happen here. That was the arrangement I had made with myself after Abuja. The console lit up in a color I had not seen in 7 years of deep space postings. Not the soft blue of routine traffic, not the amber of compact administrative channels. Red. Raw, screaming red, bleeding across the frequency monitor like something wounded. I sat up, pulled on my jacket, crossed the room before I was fully awake. The signal was broadcasting on a frequency so old it was not supposed to exist anymore. Pre-compact emergency band. The kind of channel that species used before there were rules about channels, before the Galactic Compact had organized everyone into polite queues of communication with proper headers and authorization codes. This was the frequency of last resorts. It was Solari. I knew Solari signals. Anyone who had been posted in the outer relay network for more than 2 years knew them. The Solari were one of the elder species of the Compact, ancient and elegant, and precisely the kind of beings who never, under any circumstances, broadcast on emergency channels. They had protocol, they had procedure, they had 17 layers of diplomatic communication hierarchy that they followed with religious consistency. They were not following it now. My translation matrix ran the signal through its filters and spat out words in a broken, fragmented stream, because the original broadcast was itself broken and fragmented, interrupted by static, and what I slowly understood was structural interference. The source of the signal was under physical bombardment. Colony designation, Solari Reach 7. Population, 6,200,000. The message was not addressed to any specific authority. It was addressed to anyone, everyone, whatever was out there and listening. We are being destroyed, the translation read. We are not soldiers. We are not a military installation. There are children here. There are elders here. We are a colony of people who grow food and build homes and send messages to our families, and something is erasing us, and we are asking, anyone, please, we are asking. We have 11 days. I sat with that for a moment. I had run relay stations before. I knew what I was supposed to do with incoming signals that fell outside normal compact channels. I was supposed to log them, route them to the appropriate administrative body, and wait for the standard review process. The standard review process moved at the pace of institutions, which was to say, it moved the way a glacier moves, with great confidence and no urgency. I logged the signal. Then I pulled up the audio component. That was not part of the procedure. The audio component was not required for administrative routing. It was raw data, unprocessed, just the sounds underneath the translated words. I played it for 42 seconds. I stopped it. I sat there and looked at my coffee and watched it go cold. The Dara. That was the name in the signal. The name of the thing doing the erasing. I had no file on them. My station database had no file on them. I ran a compact-wide query, which required routing through the central archive at WrathHFY, and while I waited the 11 minutes for the round-trip data exchange, I pulled up everything the station held on Solari Reach 7. A colony established 60 years ago. Agricultural, light manufacturing. A population that had grown steadily, generation over generation, the way populations do when people feel safe enough to have children, and those children feel safe enough to stay. Schools, a medical center, 3 parks, according to the civic registry, including one named after a Solari poet who had died 200 years before anyone on that colony had been born. 3 parks. The compact archive returned my query. The Dara had an entry. It was short, non-member species, outer arm origin, contact history, 3 diplomatic exchanges, all inconclusive, all at least 40 years old. Threat assessment, unclassified, unclassified. 6 million people and 11 days, and the compact's threat assessment was unclassified. I opened a channel to the Compact Emergency Coordination Office on WrathHFY. The routing took 6 minutes. The response came back in 11 more. It was polite. It was thorough. It acknowledged receipt of my forwarded signal data and informed me that the situation had been flagged for review by the Interspecies Security Council, which would convene its next scheduled session in 14 days. 14 days. 11 minus 14 is a number I did not need a computer to calculate. I read the response twice. I was very calm about it. I have learned, over the years, to be very calm about things that would make a sensible person scream, because screaming uses energy, and energy is a resource, and I prefer to use mine on things that have outcomes. I opened a different channel, not a compact channel, an old military encryption that technically no longer existed, routed through a satellite network that had been officially decommissioned 8 years ago, but which, in practice, still worked because nobody had actually gone out there to turn it off. The person who answered was not who I expected. I had expected a mid-level officer. Instead, I got a voice I recognized from a briefing room on Earth 11 years ago. Older now, rougher, but the same. Oduya Marsh, the voice said. Not a greeting, just the name, like a statement of fact. I need someone with authority, I said. Not administrative authority, the other kind. Go on. And I need them to be someone who gets angry. There was a pause, a short one. Talk to me, the voice said. So I talked. The station hummed around me. The recycled air moved through its circuits. The stars outside the viewport did what stars do, which is nothing, which is everything, and I talked for 12 minutes straight, and did not once use the words review, or protocol, or scheduled session. When I finished, there was a longer pause. How long do they have? The voice asked. 10 days and 22 hours, I said. Approximately. Another pause. I'm going to make some calls, the voice said. I know you are, I said. That is why I called you. The channel closed. I looked at the cold coffee. I did not drink it. I pulled up the compact standard procedure manual for relay stations receiving unclassified emergency signals and read through it once, carefully, from beginning to end. Then I routed a second copy of the signal data to every human diplomatic and military contact in my personal files. Not through official channels, through private addresses, the kind that people checked when they were off duty, when their guard was down, when they were just people sitting somewhere, and not representatives of anything. I included the audio component, 42 seconds of it. That was enough. That was, I had learned, always enough. You do not need to explain a sound like that. You do not need to annotate it, or contextualize it, or provide supplementary documentation. You play it for a human being, and you wait, and the human being does the rest themselves. My console began lighting up within the hour. Not official responses, personal ones. 14 people writing back in the first hour, with some version of the same 3 words, phrased 14 different ways, but all meaning the same thing. What do we do? I told them to stand by. I had no plan yet. I want to be honest about that. I am not one of those people who has clean, organized plans that unfold neatly in sequence. What I had was a direction, which is different. A direction is the thing that tells you which way to walk when the path has not been built yet. The direction was clear enough. 6 million people, 11 days, one signal, screaming on a dead frequency into the dark, asking if anyone out there was listening. Someone should answer it. That was the shape of it. I pulled up the star charts for the outer arm and began calculating distances. The coffee stayed cold. The station hummed. Outside the viewport, the stars continued doing nothing, which was fine, because I was doing something, and between the two of us we had enough covered. In the corner of my screen, a second alert began to blink. More signals, same frequency, different colony designations. Sulari Reach 3, Sulari Reach 11, Sulari Reach 19. All of them broadcasting. All of them with timelines that were slightly different, but pointing at the same horizon. I looked at the blinking alerts for a long moment. Then I opened every channel I had, official and unofficial, sanctioned and otherwise, and I started talking, and I did not stop. I had been hiding on Relay Station Kairos for 5 months, 7 days, and approximately 16 hours. That was over now. The compact emergency session convened in 36 hours. Not because they moved quickly, because I made enough noise, through enough channels, with enough people making noise alongside me, that the administrative machinery finally registered what was happening as something other than a routine filing. I was not supposed to be in the chamber. I was a relay station commander with a formal censure in my file, and no diplomatic standing and a reputation, which I had apparently earned over the years without noticing, for being the kind of person who made institutions uncomfortable by refusing to pretend that uncomfortable things were not happening. I was in the chamber because of a Varath administrator named Gral Voss, who owed me a favor, and who understood that the fastest way to stop owing a favor is to pay it, and who had the access credentials to put me in the observation gallery with a visitor's pass that technically did not authorize me to speak. The chamber was immense. Not in the way that grand architecture is immense, designed to inspire awe. Immense in the way that mathematics is immense, cold and precise, and indifferent to how small you feel standing inside it. The acoustics were designed for 63 species, optimized for frequencies across a range that included things human ears could not hear. The lighting was calibrated for visual spectrums I could not access. I sat in the observation gallery and felt, as I always felt in compact spaces, like something that had wandered in from outside and not yet been asked to leave. Ambassador Don Peters was at the human delegation table. I had worked with Don twice before and respected him completely, and knew, watching him now, that he was the wrong person for this moment. He was a genuinely good man. Careful, thorough, committed to the integrity of the process. He believed in institutions, which meant he believed in them even when they were failing, which is both the best and the worst thing about people who believe in institutions. He presented humanity's formal request calmly and with precise documentation: the Solari colony signals, the timeline, the absence of a Dara file that contained anything useful, the mathematical problem of 14 days versus 11. The Varath Council chair responded with the unhurried authority of a species that had been managing galactic affairs for 4,000 years and had developed, in that time, a profound confidence in the value of their own procedures. The situation, the chair said, was under review. The Security Council would convene its full session in accordance with established timeline provisions. In the interim, all member species were encouraged to refrain from unilateral action that might complicate diplomatic efforts. Don asked carefully whether the timeline provisions could be suspended given the urgency. The chair explained, with great patience, that the timeline provisions existed precisely for moments of urgency, because urgency, historically, was when poor decisions were most likely to be made. I watched Don absorb this, watched him prepare his next careful, measured, reasonable response. The Ohm delegation sat to the left of the human table. They did not look like anything that mapped easily to the word delegation. They occupied their section of the chamber in a way that was difficult to describe, present but distributed, attention that came from multiple directions at once. They had not spoken. They were humming, very quietly, below the range where most species would register it, but humans can feel low frequencies even when they cannot hear them, and the hum sat in my chest like a held breath. I found it more unsettling than anything else in the room. The Solari ambassador had been given a seat at the table. Her name, I had learned in the preceding 36 hours, was Thesavin. She was doing something I had not, in all my years of compact dealings, ever seen a Solari do. She was begging, not loudly, not theatrically, in the precise, restrained Solari way that made it somehow worse, because you could see how much the restraint was costing her, how the words came out perfectly formed and completely wrong in her mouth, like she was wearing someone else's expression. Solari did not ask. They negotiated. They maneuvered. They operated from positions of established advantage with studied grace. There was no advantage here. There was nothing to maneuver with. She spoke about Solari Reach 7 the way you speak about a place when you are trying to make someone else understand that it is real. Not statistics, to details. The agricultural rotation cycles. The festival that happened every year in the third park, the one named after the poet. The particular way the colony's main settlement was built around a water source that the original settlers had spent 3 years locating before they started building, because they had wanted to be sure. They had wanted to be sure. I watched the chamber listen to her. I watched 63 species, represented by their most senior diplomatic minds, processing her words through the filters of procedure and precedent and established protocol. The WrathHFY chair thanked her for her testimony, said it would be included in the official record, said the council took the situation very seriously. Dawn was about to speak again. I spoke first. "You keep calling it mathematics," I said, into a room of 60 alien species, into the specifically calibrated acoustics of a chamber not designed for my voice, without any authorization to be heard. The gallery was supposed to be silent. I was supposed to be invisible. I was, in the technical parlance of compact procedure, not permitted to address the floor. I addressed the floor. 6 million people. 11 days. You have turned that into a scheduling problem. You have turned a cry for help into an agenda item. I kept my voice level. Level is not the same as quiet. Your mathematics and their mathematics are not the same equation. The chamber was silent in a way that chambers rarely are when they contain that many minds. Not shocked. Not outraged. Quiet in the way that confusion produces quiet, the silence of beings trying to locate which category this interruption belongs in. Theseven looked up from the table. I had seen Solari faces across conference tables and in briefing rooms and in the formal portrait registries of the Compact's diplomatic archive. I knew what their expressions looked like when they were calculating, negotiating, performing the elaborate chess game of interspecies relations. What I saw on her face now was not that. It was the face of someone who had run out of options and knew it, and had not yet decided what to do with that knowledge. I had seen that face before, on people in rooms that were not this grand, in situations that had not been transmitted across the galaxy, in moments that had not been attended by 63 species and their procedural apparatus. I had worn that face. Once. A long time ago. In Abuja, where the procedure had also been very thorough and very careful, and had arrived 11 days after it needed to. "I know that face," I said, and I said it to Theseven, not to the chamber, because it was not for the chamber. I know it. She did not look away. The WrathHFY chair informed me that I was speaking without authorization, and that my observations had been noted, and that if I did not return to observer status, I would be removed from the chamber. I returned to observer status. Don caught my eye from the delegation table. He looked at me with the expression of a man who agreed with everything I had just said and wished I had not said it, which was a very specific kind of expression that I had also seen before. The vote happened 90 minutes later. The motion for immediate intervention was declined. The vote was not close. The reasons were procedural, legal, strategic, and delivered in the reasonable tones of beings who were very certain they were making the responsible choice. The motion was tabled for review in 40 days. 40 days. I was outside the chamber when Don found me. He said I had been officially censured. He said he understood why I had spoken, and that it had been brave, and that it had not helped, and that I needed to understand the limitations of what we could do within the structure of the compact. I was not listening to him, precisely. I was listening to him the way you listen to background noise while you are doing something else. My comm was open, had been open for 6 minutes. The person on the other end was waiting. "Right then," I said, when Don finished. He blinked. "How many ships do we have?" I said, into the comm, not as a question, "that are not technically in the inventory." Don stared at me. "Oduya Marsh," he said. "I know," I said. "This would be a unilateral action outside compact authorization." "Yes. It could have consequences for humanity's membership standing." "Yes. You could be court-martialed." "Don," I said, "go back inside and keep the channels open. I need someone in there I trust when this gets complicated." He stood very still for a moment. Don Peters, who believed in institutions, who had spent his career building careful diplomatic relationships, one patient conversation at a time, who understood better than almost anyone what we stood to lose by stepping outside the lines. He nodded. Once. I walked away down the corridor. My comm was full of voices, and I started sorting through them, and the shape of something began to form. Not a plan exactly, but a direction, and a direction is always where you start. The compact chamber behind me resumed its proceedings. 40 days. We had 9. In 72 hours, Earth moved. I want to be precise about that, because precision matters here. Earth did not mobilize. Mobilization is a word for prepared things, organized systems executing their designed functions. What Earth did in 72 hours was not that. It was something older and stranger and considerably louder. I was coordinating from a borrowed office in the compact station's lower levels when the roster lists started coming in. I had expected military assets. I had expected the kind of people I knew, the career professionals who understood risk assessments and operational parameters and the specific math of walking into a situation where the numbers were not in your favor. Those people came, but they were not what surprised me. What surprised me was everyone else. The intake system handling volunteer registrations was not built for the volume it received. It had been designed for a different kind of emergency, the kind where you ask for 100 people and 300 apply, and you sort through them carefully over several days. In the first 18 hours after the audio component of the Solari signals was distributed through unofficial human networks, the system received 47,000 registrations. It crashed. They rebuilt it. It crashed again. 42 seconds of audio. That was all it took. I had known it would be enough. I had not known the scale of enough. I was reviewing asset lists with my logistics coordinator, a man named Owen Garrett, who had spent 12 years managing military supply chains and who had the particular calm of someone who had seen enough chaos to stop being surprised by it, when the messages started arriving from the volunteer coordination team. Owen read through them without any visible expression for about 90 seconds. "We have a maths teacher," he said. I looked up. What? Secondary school. Maths teacher. She has listed her skills as follows. He read from the screen. Basic first aid certificate. Organizational experience from running a school's annual fundraising committee. And, he paused, the ability to explain difficult concepts to people who do not want to listen. I looked at him. She's apparently quite serious, he said. She has included a letter of recommendation from her school's principal. I thought about this for a moment. Put her in logistics, I said. Anyone who can explain difficult concepts to people who do not want to listen is a resource. Her name was Caroline Webb, and she turned out to be one of the most organized people I had encountered in 20 years of operational work, but that came later. The fleet itself was the other surprise. I had called it a fleet in my communications, because the word fleet conveyed a specific impression, and impressions matter when you are asking people to take you seriously. What we actually had was considerably more creative than the word fleet suggested. 3 carrier-class vessels, real ones properly designated, which technically did not exist in the official inventory because they had been listed as decommissioned in a budget filing 6 years ago, and then quietly not decommissioned because someone sensible had understood that decommissioning a working carrier was expensive, and the paperwork for pretending you had decommissioned it was considerably cheaper. These ships had names. I am not going to write those names here because of the same budget filing, but I knew them, and the people who crewed them knew them, and that was what mattered. Beyond those 3, mining haulers, 8 of them, heavy and slow and built for deep space extraction operations, running rail accelerator systems that were designed to fire ore payloads at precise trajectories toward collection points. Rail accelerators. At very high velocity. The fact that this was, technically, a weapons system was something the mining industry had been very careful never to emphasize in its regulatory filings. Survey vessels, exploration ships, a medical transport that had been running relief operations in the outer colonies for 4 years, under the command of a doctor named Paul Henley, who had, when he received the audio file, called his crew together, played it for them without explanation, and then said, "We are going, who is coming?" Every single one of them had come. Owen put together the numbers. He put them together very carefully, because Owen was the kind of person who did not share numbers until he was sure of them, and when he shared them with me, he did it in the specific tone of someone who is delivering information they find personally objectionable. "We are significantly outmatched," he said, "in any conventional engagement." "Yes," I said. "The Dara fleet, based on the signal data and the Compact's partial records, appears to carry weapon systems that are 2 to 3 generations beyond what we are fielding." "Yes. Our best-case scenario in a direct engagement," he said, "is that we make the math expensive enough that they recalculate." I looked at the numbers for a long time. "That is," I said, "the plan." He accepted this with the dignity of a man who had decided, somewhere in the preceding 48 hours, that he was done being surprised. The galactic reaction came in layers. The first layer was from the Compact's administrative channels, which issued a formal notice that humanity's proposed action constituted an unsanctioned military deployment in violation of Article 14 of the Compact Charter, and that Earth's government would be expected to appear before the Security Council to address this violation at the next scheduled session. The next scheduled session was in 40 days. I filed the notice where I filed all things that did not help. The second layer was more interesting. Individual species, not through official channels, were making contact, some to warn us, some to ask questions that they phrased very carefully, in the diplomatic way, where the real question was hiding inside the polite one. The Wrath, through a back channel I was not supposed to know they used, requested a technical briefing on human military assets. I sent them Owen's numbers, the real ones. There was a long silence from that channel after that. I chose to find it encouraging, because you have to choose something. The third layer was from the Dara. They contacted the fleet when we were 4 days out from Solari Reach 7. Not aggressively. That was the first thing that registered. The contact was not an attack warning. It was a communication request, formally structured, following compact communication protocols, with a precision that indicated they had studied those protocols carefully. Their representative introduced herself as Commander WrathHFY. Her voice in translation was measured and deep, and entirely without the emotional markers that human voices carry as background noise. She wanted to know who had authorized this deployment. She wanted to know who the operational commander was. She wanted to know what humanity's strategic objective was. I answered all 3 questions personally. I told her that Earth's government had authorized it, which was mostly true in the sense that no one in Earth's government had stopped it. I told her I was the operational commander, and I told her, when she asked the third question, precisely what our strategic objective was. 6 million people sent a signal asking for help. I said, "We are the help." There was a pause on the Dara channel. "This is not a recognized strategic framework," Commander WrathHFY said. "No," I said, "it is not. You have assessed our fleet capacity against your own." "Yes." "And you are proceeding." "Yes." Another pause, longer this time. "We will speak again when you arrive," she said. The channel closed. Owen looked at me from across the operations room. He had the expression of a man who was revising his probability assessments in real time. "They could have fired on us," he said. "Yes," I said. "They didn't." "No. They want to understand us first." I looked at the star chart, at the distance marker still ticking down between us and Solari Reach 7. "That gives us time." "Time for what?" I did not answer immediately. I was thinking about something the Ohm had said to me, 3 days earlier, through a frequency I had not known I had access to. 3 words. I had sat down when I heard them, which was not something I did, sitting down in the middle of operations, but those 3 words had required sitting. I had not told Owen about the Ohm contact yet. I had not told anyone. I was still working out what it meant. "Time to be something they cannot predict," I said. He accepted this. He was getting better at accepting things. I walked the ship that evening. when the operations room had settled into the focused quiet of a crew, doing what crews do when action is close, and waiting is what there is. I checked things that did not need checking. I looked in on the logistics team, where Caroline Webb was running a coordination briefing for 6 people who had arrived with entirely different backgrounds and was explaining the evacuation sequencing protocol with a patience and clarity that I would not have managed. She caught me looking through the doorway. "Is there something wrong?" she said. "No," I said. She waited, in the way that people who are good at explaining things to people who do not want to listen tend to wait. "You should not be here," I said. "None of the volunteers should be. This is going to be dangerous." She looked at me steadily. She was perhaps 50, with the kind of face that had spent a long time being organized and thoughtful and in charge of things, and she was not even slightly intimidated by me, which I found, unreasonably, a comfort. "Commander," she said, "I played the signal for my students the day it came through. 43 children between the ages of 13 and 15, she paused. "I cannot explain to you what happened in that classroom and then tell those students that I went home and waited." I nodded. I did not have an answer for that. The answer for that was in the signal itself, and we had all heard it already. I went to my quarters, looked at the viewport for a while. The stars outside were the same stars that had been outside every viewport of every posting I had held, the same light that had been there before I was born and would be there long after every decision I had ever made had turned to history. They looked the same from every war I had ever seen. I had never worked out if that was supposed to be a comfort or a warning. I decided, for now, that it was just a fact. Facts were workable. Facts were the material you used. I had facts, I had a direction, and I had a fleet of people who had heard 42 seconds of audio and decided that home was wherever someone needed help. 3 days out. I went to sleep. For once, I slept. We arrived with 4 hours left on the colony's timeline. That is the number. 4 hours. I want you to hold that number because it is the shape of everything that followed. Not 4 days. Not 4 weeks. 4 hours, which is enough time to do some things and not enough time to do others, and the knowledge of which category you are in is something you carry in your body before your mind has finished calculating it. I was in the operations room when the Dara fleet resolved on our sensors. Owen called the count in a flat, careful voice, the voice of someone who is being professional about a thing that is not professionally manageable. Their fleet was larger than our estimates. Not dramatically, not impossibly, but larger in the specific way that matters, which is the way where the gap between what you have and what they have becomes visible at the exact moment when visibility is most expensive. I looked at the display. I looked at our own fleet beside it on the comparison screen. I thought about the maths teacher in the logistics bay. "Right then," I said. "That's the shape of it." Commander WrathHFY opened communication in precisely the way she had said she would. Measured, structured, following protocol with a precision that I had begun to recognize as a cultural signature, the Dara version of courtesy. She explained, without hostility, that humanity was operating in violation of Dara territorial jurisdiction over the designated elimination zone. She explained that the Solari colony had been classified as a legitimate military target under Dara operational law. She explained that the human fleet should withdraw within 30 minutes or face engagement. "We offer this time," she said, "because we are not without mercy." There it was. I let it sit for a moment. The word, mercy, from the species that was erasing 6 million people from a planet they had built, with 3 parks and a festival and a water source they had spent 3 years finding because they had wanted to be sure. I did not say anything about that, not yet. "Thank you, Commander," I said. "I would like to discuss the legal classification of the colony's population as a military target. I believe there may be definitional questions worth examining." There was a short pause. "You wish to argue definitions," she said. "I wish to have a conversation," I said. "You gave us 30 minutes. I would like to use them." She agreed. I had expected her to agree. The Dara communicated in the language of studied deliberation, and a commander who opens with a communication request rather than an opening salvo is a commander who is still gathering data. I was data she had not encountered before. I intended to be as much data as 30 minutes would allow. I talked. I had been good at this for a long time, the specific skill of keeping a conversation moving while other things happened around it, of holding attention with words while time passed and things changed, and the situation on the ground shifted in ways that the words were making possible. I talked about compact law and the definitional thresholds for civilian versus military status. I talked about the precedent set by the WrathHFY conflict resolution of 200 years ago, which I had read about once in a compact history archive and had not expected to reference in an actual operational context. I asked questions that required considered answers. I found the places in Commander WrathHFY's responses where she was genuinely engaging with the argument rather than simply waiting for the time to expire, and I pulled on those threads. Somewhere in the colony below, evacuation ships were loading. The 30 minutes expired. Commander WrathHFY said, "You have not withdrawn." "No," I said. "Then we will proceed." What followed was not what you would call a battle in the way that word is usually used, with its implication of two comparable forces exchanging fire in a structured progression. It was more like the experience of being very badly outmatched while refusing to acknowledge that as a reason to stop. The Dara weapons systems were precisely as advanced as Owen's estimates had suggested. Our point defense networks worked hard and worked well and were not sufficient. The mining haulers took the worst of it because they were the slowest and the most visible, and because the people running them knew this and held their positions anyway. I will not list the names of everyone I lost in those hours. Not because they do not deserve to be listed, but because a list is the wrong shape for what they were. They were people who had heard 42 seconds of audio and made a decision, and the decision had brought them here, and here had costs. I kept the comm open with Commander WrathHFY through the engagement. Not continuously. In the gaps. I had things to say and I said them, not arguments this time, but something closer to information, delivered in the calm way that people deliver information they need the other person to actually receive. "Look at what we brought," I said, during one of those gaps. "Look at the asset list. You know what these ships are. Mining vessels, survey ships, a medical transport. We did not send a war fleet, Commander. We sent what we had. We sent everything we had." She did not respond immediately. "Why?" she said finally, and it was not entirely a question. "Because 6 million people asked," I said. Another gap. The operations room around me was controlled noise, voices, and system alerts, and the specific sounds of a crew doing the most they could do with what they had. "We have no strategic interest in the Solari," I said. "No territorial claim, no resource advantage, no treaty obligation. We came because they asked, and because we heard them ask. This is not strategic behavior," Commander WrathHFY said. "No," I said, "it is not. The compact channels had been monitoring. I knew they were monitoring. I had known from the moment we entered the engagement zone that 63 species were watching through their sensor networks and their diplomatic feeds and their intelligence systems, processing what they were seeing and running it through whatever frameworks they used to understand things. I did not know what they would do with what they were seeing. I had hoped, I had planned, loosely, around the possibility of the hope being right. But hoping and planning around hope are different from knowing, and I did not know. The Ohm fleet, translated into local space, 47 minutes into the engagement. Not the full compact fleet, not a formal intervention. The Ohm, specifically. Their ships were unlike anything in the compact's public registry, shapes that did not resolve into expected geometries, present in a way that the sensors kept having to recalibrate to confirm. Then the Vareth, 3 of their strategic vessels. Then others, species I knew, and species I had only read about, and at least one species whose name I could not immediately place. Each of them moving independently, not in the coordinated formation of a planned intervention, but in the separate, individual way of beings, who had each reached the same conclusion through their own process. Commander WrathHFY went quiet for 2 minutes. I remembered what the Ohm had said to me 6 days earlier, on the frequency I had not known I had access to. We remember now. The Dara fleet did not fire again. The withdrawal was announced formally, through proper compact channels, with the careful language of a species that does not lose but does recalculate. Commander WrathHFY's final communication to me was brief. "We will return," she said, "when we have completed our analysis." "We will be here," I said. "Yes," she said. "That appears to be the relevant fact." The channel closed. Evacuation ships were clearing the planet's atmosphere. I watched them on the display. Little blips of light, each one full of people, each one representing a decision made at some point in the colony's history to put down roots and build something, and each one now carrying those people away from the thing they had built, because the thing was gone but the people were not. 4,300,000. Not 6 million. I kept both numbers. You have to keep both numbers. The ones you got there in time for, and the ones you did not. Keeping only one is a way of lying to yourself about the shape of what happened. My comms officer, a young man named George Alcott who had been on his first deployment when this started, and would never be on a first anything again, looked up from his console. "The Solari ambassador is asking to speak to you personally," he said. I looked at the display, the evacuation blips, clearing the planet one by one. "Tell her I will call back," I said. "I am busy." "Busy with what, Commander?" George asked. "Counting," I said. He did not ask what I was counting. He was learning. 6 weeks after the engagement at Solari Reach 7, I was back on Relay Station Kairos. I had requested the posting. Again. The same narrow bunk, the same recycled air, with its specific smell of metal and old arguments. Kairos, which the compact had originally named from an obscure reference in human classical literature, meaning the right moment, the opportune point, the moment when action and circumstance align. I had always thought it was a pretentious name for a relay station. I had revised that opinion somewhat. The compact was in a state that the Vareth Council Chair, in a formal address to the full membership, described as unprecedented constitutional reflection, which was the diplomatic way of saying that something had happened that none of the existing rules had been designed to handle, and everyone was being very careful about what they said next. The Dara had not retaliated. The Dara had done something more interesting than retaliation. They had gone quiet, in the way that very organized minds go quiet when they are revising a fundamental assumption, the deep, working silence of recalculation. Compact intelligence, which now flowed to the human delegation with a generosity that had not existed 6 weeks ago, indicated that the Dara had formally reclassified humanity in their operational taxonomy. The specific classification was in a Dara language that the translation matrix rendered, after 3 attempts, as unpredictable variable, Tier 1. I had been a Tier 1 unpredictable variable before, from the perspective of certain governments, in connection with certain events I still did not discuss. I understood what it meant. It meant they were afraid, not of our fleet, which they had correctly assessed as inferior, of the thing the fleet represented, which they did not yet have a name for, because it was a thing that did not fit inside the frameworks they used to understand behavior. Fear is negotiable. I had written that in my log the morning the intelligence report came through. Contempt is not. They had begun this with contempt. They were proceeding with something else now. That was better. Worse could come later, but better was where we were, and better was workable. The political reshaping of the compact was slower and noisier and considerably more complicated than the military situation. 30-year junior members of the Galactic Compact did not typically conduct unauthorized military operations in violation of Article 14, and then receive expanded diplomatic standing as a result. That was not how institutions worked, in the Compact or anywhere else. And yet, the Varath produced a document. I received a copy because copies of everything were being sent to the human delegation now, without being asked, which was itself a kind of statement. The document was 17 volumes long. I read all 17 volumes, or as much of them as the translation matrix could render into something a human mind could process, because I believed in knowing exactly what people thought of you even when, especially when, what they thought was uncomfortable. The Varath had been studying the engagement at Solari Reach 7 with their customary thoroughness. They had analyzed the fleet composition, the tactical decisions, the communication logs, the sequence of events from the first signal at Relay Station Kairos through to Commander WrathHFY's withdrawal. They had cross-referenced against 4,000 years of compact military and diplomatic history. They had built models. Their primary conclusion was contained in one sentence near the end of the 14th volume, after 13.5 volumes of extraordinary methodical groundwork. Human decision-making under crisis conditions appeared to bypass strategic calculus in favor of an unclassified internal metric that they were designating, provisionally, as enough. Enough. 17 volumes, 4,000 years of institutional memory, and the conclusion was enough. I put the document down and looked at the ceiling of my office for a while. Don Peters came to see me in the 3rd week. He flew out to Kairos specifically, which meant he had something to say that he did not want to say through channels, which meant it was either very good or very complicated, and with Don, those two things were often the same. He looked tired in the way that people look tired when they have been doing important work under significant pressure for an extended period, the specific exhaustion of someone who has been right about something and is only now being allowed to act on it. He told me that the compact was revising the human block standing, formally. Not an apology, because institutions do not apologize. They revise and restructure and reallocate, but the structural effect was that humanity would now have full Security Council participation rights, which was a thing that senior compact members had been negotiating toward for 11 years through careful diplomatic effort and had not achieved. We had achieved it, apparently, by doing the thing that careful diplomatic effort had been trying to make unnecessary. "You are being very calm about this," Don said. "I am always calm," I said. He made the expression he made when he disagreed with something I had said, but was choosing not to address it directly. He had a very specific face for that. "The Solari ambassador has been trying to reach you," he said. "I know. She has been trying for 6 weeks. "I know," I said. "I have been thinking about what to say." Thesavin came to Kairos on a Tuesday. She came without her diplomatic staff, without the formal trappings of a Solari official visit, without the studied elegance that Solari carried as a professional attribute. She arrived with 2 aides and a request for a private meeting, and I gave her one. She was different from the Solari I had seen in the compact chamber. Not broken, that is the wrong word, but altered in the way that people are altered by the thing they have been through, the specific permanent mark that certain experiences leave on how a being moves through the world. She did not offer gratitude. I had expected gratitude. Gratitude I knew how to manage. What she offered was something in Solari that the translation matrix struggled with for several seconds before rendering it as something close to, "I see you now. I could not see you before." That failure of seeing was mine. I sat with that for a moment. It was more than I had expected. It was, in some ways, more than gratitude would have been, because gratitude moves in one direction and what Thesavin was doing was something else, an acknowledgement that went to a deeper question than thank you. Thank you is about what you did. What Thesavin was doing was about what we were, what we had always been, apparently, that she had not been able to see before. "Right," I said. "That will do." She looked at me. There was something almost like humor in it, which was not a thing I had associated with Solari, and which told me that she too was different from the version of herself that had stood in the compact chamber and begged. "You are an unusual being, Commander," she said. "I am a very ordinary being," I said. "That is rather the point." She left 2 hours later. I watched her shuttle clear the docking bay, and then I sat for a while and did not do anything in particular, which was not something I was good at, but which the situation seemed to call for. The Ohm message. I had not told anyone the full content. I had told Don that the Ohm had made contact, because that was something he needed to know for the diplomatic picture. I had not played him the recording. I had been carrying those 3 words for 6 weeks, turning them over, finding new angles on them. There are some things you need time with before you can hand them to another person. I asked Don if he had a few minutes. He had been about to leave for his return shuttle. He stayed. I pulled up the recording. I told him it was Ohm. I told him it had come through a frequency I had not known I could access, 6 days before the engagement, 3 days after Earth had begun moving. I played it. 3 words. In Ohm, which the translation matrix rendered in the only way it could, the way that always felt inadequate for what the Ohm said when they said anything at all, because the Ohm were ancient and distributed, and their language carried weight that the translation matrix delivered as plain text, and plain text was not enough. We remember now. Don listened. He did not speak immediately, which for Don was unusual. He processed things by speaking, usually. He was quiet, for long enough that I started to wonder if the recording had not come through. "What does it mean?" he said finally. I had been working on how to explain this for 6 weeks. The Ohm are distributed, I said. You know that. They don't have individual memory the way we do. They have pattern recognition, across all of themselves, across a very long time. Don waited. The compact is 400 years old, I said. The Ohm were involved in building it. They were part of the reason it exists. But 400 years is a long time, and things that start for one reason can persist for different reasons. And somewhere along the way, the reason the compact was built and the thing the compact became were not entirely the same thing anymore. Don was watching me carefully. The Ohm recognized something, I said, in what we did, in the way we moved, the why of it. They recognized a pattern that matched something very old in their own history. I paused. Something from before they distributed. Before they became what they are now, when they were individual beings, with the specific kind of urgency that individual beings have, who can hear a sound from across the dark and feel it and not be able to not respond. What did they recognize? Don asked. I looked out the viewport. The stars were there. They were always there. The same light from the same distances, indifferent and permanent and entirely unbothered by anything that had happened or was happening or would happen next. I had looked at stars from a lot of viewports in my life, and they had always looked like that, and I had never quite decided what it meant that they did. They recognized the thing that made them build the compact in the first place, I said, before the procedures, before the review sessions and the 40-day timelines and the 17 volumes of methodical analysis. I thought about how to say it. The reason you build something like the compact is not because you have great institutional vision. It is because you heard something and you could not stay where you were. And somewhere in the 400 years of becoming an institution, that original thing had gotten buried under everything that was built on top of it. And we reminded them, Don said. I think so. Yes. He was quiet again. The 3 words, he said. We remember now. They were not saying they remembered us. No, I said, they were not. We sat with that for a while. Outside, the stars did what stars do, which is stay exactly where they are and wait for the questions to catch up with them. The final thing happened a month later. Not a dramatic final thing. A quiet one. The kind that only registers as significant in retrospect, when you can lay it against everything that came before and see the shape it makes. A new signal arrived at Relay Station Kairos. Different frequency, not compact channels, not emergency bands, not anything in the standard registry, raw and open and aimed specifically at this station, which meant whoever sent it knew where to aim. Different species, not one I had a name for, not one in any compact database I could access. The translation matrix worked on it for 4 minutes. That was long, for the matrix. Signals it could not immediately place took longer, and this one was not in any language catalog that had been built from compact member species communication. It rendered the message in plain text. 6 words. I read them. I put the message down on the console in front of me and looked at it. I picked up my coffee. It was, for once, still warm. I had been hiding on Relay Station Kairos for 5 months, 7 days, and approximately 16 hours when the Solari signal first arrived. I had come here because nothing was supposed to happen here, because it was quiet, because quiet was what I had needed after certain things I still did not discuss. I looked at the 6 words. I looked out the viewport. I thought about the maths teacher in the logistics bay who could not explain to 43 teenagers why she had gone home and waited. I thought about the mining haulers holding their positions. I thought about 3 parks and a water source someone had spent 3 years finding because they had wanted to be sure. I thought about 4,300,000 little blips clearing a planet's atmosphere, each one full. I thought about Commander WrathHFY saying, "We are not without mercy," and the specific irony of those words in that moment. I thought about the ohm, ancient and distributed, and suddenly remembering something they had lost inside 400 years of procedure. I thought about 42 seconds of audio, and what it did to people who heard it, and why that was always going to be enough. We were never the monsters of this galaxy. We were the thing the monsters forgot to account for. Big difference. Turns out, I opened the comm. Kairos Station Actual, I said. Go ahead. I read the 6 words again, already composing my reply, already feeling the direction form before the path had been built, already knowing that I was not going to request a different posting this time. The stars outside were the same stars. They would always be the same stars. And that was fine, because out here, between them, in the frequencies that no one was supposed to be listening to, people kept sending signals, and someone was going to keep answering,